I am delighted to welcome Adam Holden to Fin Spotlight today. Adam is the CEO of NorthRow, a RegTech company based here in the UK. And to kick us off, Adam, maybe as we do with most of our Fin Spotlights here, could you maybe just give us a 30-second intro to NorthRow and what you guys do?
Yeah, absolutely. So NorthRow is a technology partner to compliance professionals. We focus 100% really on building and delivering software and insights and platforms that enable the colleagues in that industry to make decisions quicker and also better informed. So we focus mostly on the sort of the perpetual KYC part of the compliance universe, if you like. So we absolutely want to make sure that we're helping the guys who operate in that really important and difficult space make their jobs a whole lot easier using technology.
So very much compliance focused, onboarding focused, trying to help them with the decisioning of whether they should onboard that client or not effectively.
Yeah, absolutely, and not just not just at the onboarding phase. I think as many people, and including you guys have pointed out, KYC or AML checks are not something that you do once and then forget about, right? There's
Mm.
something that you should be doing all the time. So absolutely, we're focusing on taking or helping our colleagues, reach that decision about whether or not they should do business with a particular customer, and do it safely and do it quickly. Yeah.
So you guys have a number of solutions, or is it consolidated solutions? And what are those kind of different elements to the solution at the moment that you guys have really focused on?
Yeah, so we started out building essentially, what a lot of companies who were sort of starting on this journey doing, actually sort of comparing the data that was input by the client or collected by the client against sort of particular data sets to then reach a kind of a decision, I suppose. But as we've evolved, we've evolved the solution to include ongoing monitoring, so perpetual monitoring of that individual or company. We've actually broadened the solution to be inclusive of entities and KYB, as well as the individuals related to those entities, as well as onboarding for sort of B2C
Yeah.
companies as well. And also, as we've kind of gone through this difficult pandemic, we've actually broadened out into being enabling our customers to do this from a remote perspective. So we have a sort of a proprietary remote verify solution that allows
Mm.
an automatic straight through collection of information and checking of an individual, such as a director who may be operating remotely, document capture, document verification, identity verification, etc., worldwide.
So what's the major challenge that most of your client, or prospects are facing? Is it that they're still doing this all manually? Are some of them started and it's actually that they've got a number of different kind of ways of doing this, and actually this is bringing it all together? What's the sort of main challenge that you guys are really helping to overcome then?
Yeah, so I think that there's a number of things. So absolutely, as you say, one of the things that a lot of our clients have previously struggled with is a manual process. So clients are not compliant. They're already compliant. They have to be, but that's often um, they've often sort of reached that compliance via very manual solutions. So that will be,
Yeah.
very much emailing backwards and forwards document, potentially unsecurely, doing manual checks, employing, but well qualified individuals to do the job that actually could a large part of it could be done with technology. So manual replacement of a manual process is something that we do extremely well. I think what we also see though is in the past, I think as I mentioned before, clients or companies such as ourselves will provide technology that enable just a result to be automated and a check result to be presented to the client. But as we're finding more and more, compliance professionals don't always have the deep knowledge of the ever increasing regulation to understand whether or not that result means something against their own risk profile or risk policy. And so what we do is we allow and enable lots of information to be presented in a way that enables the client teams to understand the output that they're receiving through the platform and actually just do their job better. We find
Mm.
that actually just presenting them with a bunch of data it doesn't necessarily solve, it doesn't necessarily get them to the answer that they want to get to, because they still have to do work to interpret that, take it forward, match it against their risk policy. So we try to make sure that actually we're focusing on solving the problem from the perspective of the client team, as opposed to just providing whizzy technology that provides a bunch of unclear information back.
So much more about, informing the end user to make intelligent decisions and actually making sure that that's presented in such a way that it actually does affect what their decision, or that, that their sort of process is going to be, not just bury the data deep down somewhere.
That's right. You know,
Mm,
the three main touch points that we might have into an organization will be the you know the actual compliance team themselves. So they want to understand whether or not the information they're receiving back from the customers in going through this process is in line with their risk management policy.
mm,
That's very important. If they don't know that, or if they can't easily see that, they still have a hurdle to get over in
yeah.
actually doing the job of compliance. We also noticed that, of course, many teams are, because they're very concerned with making sure that they are compliant, they are putting a lot of resource into these teams to sort of stay on the right side of conservative or
Mm,
prudence. And so actually, they're potentially nervous about using technology to take that away. There's still a sort of a bit of inertia, I think, against technology in this space. But also, we see challenges with respect to chief infrastructure or technology officers. They want to make sure that they're integrating a piece of technology that's easy to integrate, that is that is very conversive with other systems that they may have, or is actually easy to knock out on a manual solution. So there's multiple focuses, but ultimately it's about helping the people in the client business to do their job more easily, and not necessarily be bamboozled with technology.
you've already touched on quite a bit, so just wanted to pick up on one or two of those points actually. So you talked about removing some of the manual steps and what you do is automate, and that's what you guys are
Mm.
quite good at. Just give us some of the examples then of what some specific processes that you guys are automating for customers then.
Yeah. So if we think about in many organizations, the manual process of sort of maintaining or reaching compliance with respect to anti-money laundering, there's a collection of information that may be from the sort of the early stages of an engagement. That information, you may want to make sure that you're collecting information about the individual, where they live, information about an entity that you may be doing business with. If you're a B2B, you would normally take that information and check that against data that you may have purchased elsewhere from actually a pure data provider. You'd have to do that via a sort of a different portal. You may enter information into that portal. What
Mm,
happens if somebody, you haven't necessarily got the information by sitting face to face in front of the customer? You have to collect it remotely. It might be a different email account that the team uses, etc., etc. And then presenting the information back, how do you interpret that with respect to the risk management policy? What is the threshold at which that is a good result or a bad result? Well, all those manual challenges can be done with a platform like ours. So, for example, we can connect directly into a CRM system, a customer relationship management system. The information that you would naturally collect as part of that data flows straight into the platform. So there's none of that data entry, and also that's much more controlled. Also, if there is information that we need to collect from an individual that is remote, we can automatically trigger the collection of that information by providing an email address. Data is sent to that individual. It takes control of the mobile device that they may be holding, does an automatic, really secure liveness check of the individual against their document. There's face matching, face ID, etc. And then it sends a signal back into the platform. And then you've got all that information ready to check against data sources that are integrated directly into the platform. And then a result as to whether or not that is a yes, go ahead and do business with that particular
mm,
person or entity, or no is presented to you. And then if it's ambiguous, because inevitably in our industry and in this process, there are just natural ambiguities, such as, you may be checking an entity that's NorthRow Limited, or it might be
mm,
NorthRow Ltd, and there isn't an exact match. So what we do in our process that we've sort of coined amber management is we deal with those sort of ambiguous cases that actually take up, on a Pareto's law perspective, 20%
Mm.
of the results that come back actually take up 80% of the time of a team, and actually could constitute 80% of the risk. We then use algorithms to reduce the sort of the fuzzy matching issues that you have in that space, and actually then provide a conclusive result by cross-checking against different data sources. So all of the sort of the physical pain points that you might have in doing this extremely important process can be done and are done very well by the technology that we have built and provide.
Mm. I mean, I know amber management's a big thing you guys talk about as well, because I guess from a low risk perspective, and where it's sort of everything's a check check check, it's a fairly sort of right. That's almost an easy answer. Also, where it's kind of an obvious no, it's an easy answer. How do you I guess help with your clients really determine, okay, well look, here's your bucket of ambers, and here's how you can actually reduce that down. Is there
Mm.
sort of, I guess this might be a tricky question, but sort of almost best practices you're starting to see around, okay, well look, this is how you can start to manage that bucket of clients in a better way.
Yeah, so we there's where a client may have selected as a result of sort of coming on board with us, they may select for whatever reason a particular data source that they have decided is a really good data source for address verification, for example, or it might be credit reference agency information. They may decide that actually or the result of that check using that sort of single data source may come up with this sort of ambiguous result. Well, what we can do is we can work with the client to say that, when that happens, do you want us to cross-check that against, one, two, three additional data sources that provide a similar level of information, which might then sort of increase the match rate, if you like,
Mhm.
above a threshold that they have originally set as being, if it's above this certain number, then we will say, yeah, no, that looks good enough for us. That's within our risk appetite. So we
Yeah.
can use multiple data sets to do that. We can also use different methods of verification. So it might be that actually, verifying simply a document that has information securely attached to that document, it doesn't provide the right information on its own, and therefore would provide an inconclusive report. We can actually say, well, we can do a liveness check or a sort of a video selfie with an individual automatically. Might take a slightly longer time to do that, depending on the responsiveness of the individual. But if it comes back with a positive on that, then we combine that with the result we've already received, and actually that is then above your sort of pass rate, if you like, for your threshold. Equally, though, whether or not it's conclusive or inconclusive is often not a binary result. It's often set against a threshold of acceptance, a bit like any
Mm.
risk management sort of operation. And so what we can do is we can set the level of thresholds on all of the rules within our system. We have over 300 rules based on various parts of the process, and actually by understanding and matching those against the client's own risk appetite, it allows you to control the level of, if you like, rechecking that you
Mm.
have to do.
I mean, I was going to ask you about that sort of, from what you were just saying there, it sounds like the rules configuration has been is a huge thing that everyone, just needs that flexibility to be say, well, look, if in this scenario you can take this, take these rules and configure them how you need to for your business. That's obviously been you know, that's a huge thing in this world, because everybody has a slightly different policy, everyone has a slightly different set of rules they want to adhere to, everyone has a slightly different business as well. So they're all,
Mm.
the risk is different. How do you think, maybe taking that, but also thinking about more broadly, how do you think your solution sort of tackles this whole challenge a little bit differently to others in the market as well? Because there are obviously, we were just talking before we came on here about the number of reg techs out there and other
Mm.
software providers out there. How do you guys feel like you do this a bit differently to others, or uniquely?
So we have a very quick sort of onboarding process ourselves with our clients. So we make sure that we're, the moment the client decides that they want to engage with us, we have a very easy integration process into their business, whether it's actually just a setup or actually a physical or technology integration to the business. I think what we do not do, and what we don't want to do, is spend too long with a client prior to their use of our solution, pre-configuring the system, and having it as essentially a you cannot change that for quite a while type
Mm.
scenario. So we want to make sure that actually we're straight in with the client, we're up to speed, we're working, and through a very short implementation phase, we're working with them to help them understand how they can configure the platform and set the rules, rather than us set them up and then off they go and they don't understand how to change it going forward. We've come across companies before who essentially have a almost an immovable feast with respect to that configuration, and it just doesn't work. As you said,
Mm.
so many companies and clients have uh, their own risk appetite. Even within industry, you'll have clients that are sort of have a very different risk appetite depending on their geography or the sort of the market they're looking at. Small, medium, large clients, etc. And so we wanted to make sure that the configurability is very dynamic. And if
Yeah.
a client grows, then they may want to change their risk thresholds, and they can do that live in the system. So it's a bit like turning dials, literally,
Mm.
in the system. We wanted to make sure that was how we did it, and we think that really works well for us.
What kind of organizations does your solution, as you said, like, there are lots of solutions out there, and generally solutions are designed for sort of a segment or a type of business, and it's quite well suited. And also geographies, data is obviously a huge aspect of the business. Is there a sort of a geography and or type of client who NorthRow solutions do work really well for?
Yeah. So yes. So at the moment we're really focused on deepening our exposure with the UK financial services industry. We particularly work with mid-market companies. We don't tend to focus on enterprise companies unless they're working with a partner, nor do we focus on the very sort of small end of the market. What we do very well is we've got a very broad solution that deals with the onboarding of entities or individuals, or entities and individuals if they're connected. And so we tend to focus on UK-based mid-market SME lenders, payment organizations, building societies, those sort of mid-market players, because they tend to have a need for a broad automated solution that focuses on the more complex end of this problem. I think
Mm.
we've spent a long time building out functionality that tackles some of the more complex parts of the sort of the problem, rather than just high volume, low value, check, check, check.
Yeah.
Kind of. So yes, that's the sort of the people we work with. We work with a number of organizations that are UK headquartered but have international footprint. And as you
Mm.
say, that's when it's important to make sure that we have the right data partners, because some data partners focus in different mega geographies. They may
Yeah.
be Asia focused or they may be US focused. So yeah, that's what we do.
What are some of the challenges you see? I mean, you're obviously a technology company, but implementation's obviously a huge thing. I mean, that's where we at Beyond obviously see a lot of challenges. What are some of the challenges you're seeing when you're talking to organizations? They're looking at probably a number of solutions. They've probably got some solutions in-house already. What are some of the challenges they need to overcome, really? And typically, even during implementation, from your perspective,
Mm,
um, through you guys have been doing this for a number of years now. What keeps
yeah.
coming up, and what are some of the challenges that you see?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think certainly over the last 12 to 18 months, we've seen sometimes, especially in the larger organizations, a slight disconnect between the sort of the compliance teams within the financial services organization that are really, you know, they're at the coalface. Basically, they need this, they need the pain relieved, they need the solution, and they sort of know what they want. But actually, what you end up dealing with as a supplier is maybe a sort of a wider procurement function that doesn't necessarily understand the specific pain. And it is quite a specific pain
Mm.
point, isn't it? Within that RegTech solves. We tend obviously to deal with either operations departments or compliance and risk management functions. That's not necessarily the sort of the angle that the procurement team take, and as a result, that the engagement itself may not be optimized from the outset. So that's something that we've seen recently, and not surprising, procurement teams are probably scrutinizing potential engagements a lot more closely at the moment. So that's one thing. I think from a sort of a macro perspective, and I've seen this a lot over a lot longer time period than just the pandemic itself, is a sort of a transaction unit mindset. So,
Mm,
when we're in the market, when we're talking to some clients or some prospects, there is still um, a consideration to solve this pain from the perspective of how many transactions is it? What is the unit cost of a transaction? Um, and actually, really, the problem is best solved by considering it from the perspective of what can the technology solution, how can that solve my pain?
mm,
And actually, regardless of the number of transactions, whether it's a low volume, high value um, a client or prospect, or an extremely high volume, sort of per transaction, low value client. Actually, it's more about the sort of the value of the pain being solved. And I
mm.
think that's what, from a sort of from a market perspective, needs to evolve. And we're definitely pushing ourselves and sort of coming at it much more from that perspective. Is this is about technology and essentially brains sitting on top of data that solve the problem, not necessarily how good is the specific data and how many transactions do you sort of deal with. So actually,
Mm.
the industry and the buyers need to move a lot more to thinking about this from the perspective of how can technology solve my problem, rather than how much does it cost to do a check. And that's sort of what we've been thinking about a lot.
Yeah, and I suppose, I think that's probably varies depending on the markets you're speaking to there as well. And obviously, really interesting to hear that that the market that you guys are speaking to, that's kind of the way they're looking at it. And business case is a huge thing in terms of, right, how do you build that case to bring in new technology or new suppliers? Um, I guess maybe just to sort of follow that up, what would be your almost recommendations to that side of the market? Would it be to just look, let's think about, start to change your mindset on that a little bit? How do you overcome the barriers with procurement and maybe getting them to talk to better to compliance as well?
Yeah, I would absolutely recommend that compliance professionals who have to, who must do a good job in this space. And whether or not they choose to use technology or a manual process is
Mm,
obviously entirely their choice. But actually, it's valuing the problem needs to be properly understood. How much does it really mean to you to get this right? And so value it in terms of the time taken for the team to do the work, the sort of the potential risk by not doing the job properly, the potential risk by not having the process integrated into the rest of your sort of single customer journey, if that's what you're aspiring to have. If you don't really value that problem or pain point in correctly, you don't then, or you may not make the right decision with respect to sort of reduce that pain. So, for example, if you just think that really a barrier to using technology to do this, and technology can do this process extremely well, if not better, than people, because it's sort of it's perpetual KYC these days. It's not. I used to, I've worked places before where actually the periodicity of doing checks on customers was based on how much resource you had, which is obviously the wrong way around. So if you don't value the problem properly, you probably won't make the right decision to do this better, and you may end up with a suboptimal solution. So yes, I implore compliance professionals to think holistically about what the value of solving this problem really is to you.
I think the other thing we see as well is, I think you're spot on in terms of the cost and the risk. We also see, look, what's the opportunity as well of getting this right, and trying to flip that round to sort of say, look, what's the customer opportunity? Can you know, decrease dropout rates? Can you increase the value of that customer relationship?
Absolutely. So that sort of third leg of the stool, without a doubt, is
Mm,
bringing the sort of the compliance process to the forefront of the customer experience. And as well as reducing the time to revenue. You know,
Mm.
if you're a salesperson in an organization, it is absolutely imperative to you to have a great customer onboarding journey and process, because you know the last thing that you want to do as a salesperson is to have a great conversation with a prospect and be extremely eager to do business with you, and then the sort of the back office either lets you down, or the information isn't collected enough to get them on board quickly. So we've all been in situations where, probably from a personal perspective or a business perspective, we've just decided to bomb out of an onboarding process because it was awful.
Yeah.
And actually, therefore, RegTech has a massive part to play in bringing compliance to the other side of the fence, and being a real enabler to quicker revenue and a better customer experience, without a doubt.
I mean, that's certainly, you know, whereas compliance had probably became or maybe you can still say has become a bit of a blocker to doing business. Actually, RegTech is and I guess technology in general is helping to make compliance an enabler, right? Because if you can get that right, what are some of the trends that you've seen? I think, you know, NorthRow has been around 10 years or so
Mm.
now in terms of, and a lot has changed in that time. What are some of the trends you see of late, and what do you see maybe in the next couple of years in terms of driving this kind of space forward as well?
Um, well, we've certainly seen digital transformation take hold in this process, and many other processes. But I think that's been around for a while. You know, we've obviously grown on the basis of people wanting to transform these processes. You know, the technology can transform and automate much more than it could ever automate before. So that's certainly a trend, and a trend that I see continuing. I think that um, you know, and I agree with absolutely with some of the research that Beyond have done here, that actually things are getting much more customer centric these days. You know, we are seeing uh, prospects come and talk to us who want to make compliance um, an integral part of that customer experience. In fact, they see it as a competitive advantage. So by bringing technology into that space, they're able to sort of leapfrog some of their competitors in providing a great customer experience, and having compliance almost a sort of an integral part of just the overall customer life cycle. You know, that's certainly a trend that we are seeing, and that we welcome. Is that, you know, we want to see businesses that have essentially a single view of the customer during their entire life cycle through the lens of technology. So you might have a
Mhm.
CLM system that is with the customer through the sales cycle, the marketing cycle, the implementation, the onboarding, the customer support, and ongoing customer success, and then offboarding too. So there's absolutely no reason why a business client of ours, for example, needs to have multiple systems. If they could have a single system that does all of the jobs, then actually they can
Mhm.
just get on and do whatever whatever their core business is, whether it's SME lending or payments. You know, all the other stuff, they're dealing with the customers, just a single view. So I absolutely agree with that. I think that from a I'm seeing more and more people start to look at having a complete connection between their risk management policy and their risk appetite framework. That may be something that the board and the risk committee overviews, actually reflected in the technology that helps them
Mhm.
manage that too. So, you know, we want to see more MLROs managing their portfolio, for example, on the basis of scheduling out perpetual KYC on a risk basis, that being completely integrated, and that be a very direct read across to their risk documentation. I'm sure that would be something that the regulator would, the relevant regulator in any given industry, would absolutely welcome as well. That sort of documentation weakness, I think, and the process weakness has been something that has blighted the industry for quite a while, and will continue to do so while the regulation continues to increase and crime continues to proliferate. It'll be about how a regulator can see that what you decide to do at the board is what the guys are doing on the ground, and there's a complete connection there.
We've seen a big increase in the sort of sophistication in some of the RegTech tools and maturity of some of those tools as well in the last few years. Um, how far do you think, when you look at client processes and when you're looking at, when you're speaking to customers and when you're actually working with them, how far along do you think, how mature is the industry at the moment? How much further does it have to go till it's, where we could say, okay, well, look, we've probably hit, maybe not stage one of this, but maybe sort of, our next kind of next evolution, and we've kind of hit a good level across the industry. Whereabouts do you think we are at the moment?
Um, that's a really good question. I think that there's definitely been an increased sophistication in and an increased level of sort of amount of specialism in regtex. This is a complex area. We're combating complex operators, bad actors in the system. Well, we're helping our clients to do that, and it's difficult for sort of lots and lots of firms to do everything. So inevitably, you tend to get specialisms, and
Mm,
especially in the areas of transaction management, transaction monitoring, and sort of complex analytics, and using machine learning and AI in that space. I think that we've I don't think there's going to be a plateau necessarily. I think the sort of the curve is inflected the other way, as it will just get steeper and quicker, and there'll be more and more sort of specialisms. I think we're probably still catching up on the sophistication of the criminals, and a lot of the sort of the discussions around the legislation and the movements in that space are indicative of that. I think it's
mm,
great that we're sort of moving towards, certainly in Europe, a sort of a single sort of supervisory body, or at least sort of making noises to that effect. But I think we're still away from actually getting ahead of the game. I think that this is where the power of the sort of reg tech industry acting as one is going to be really important. If we are seeing that there's a number of you know colleague companies out there in the sort of wider industry that are doing certain parts of solving parts of the puzzle really, really well. I think it's incumbent on us as an industry to work together, make it much more easy for us to operate together, so that we can collectively work with some of the larger organizations in particular in solving this problem. If we try to stay too siloed, I think the challenge is then on the well, not only for us as suppliers, if you like, as partners, but actually on the client as well, to have to integrate a number of different technologies that don't quite work. And certainly from our perspective, where our mantra is, making compliance work, that doesn't really make compliance work for the people who actually have the hard job at the coalface of doing it. So
mm.
much greater interoperability between regtech organizations, I think, is going to be critical.
I think, I mean, the reason we've set up FinTech Innovation Network, it's about how do people who are on a compliance, that's their main concern of making sure that their organizations are compliant and also doing it efficiently. But that giving them the problem of, okay, well, you need to kind of work out how you solve your whole problem. Whereas almost you can flip that round a little bit and say, look, if we can create really strong partnerships and alliances with others in the industry to give people that coverage, I suppose is the main thing.
Mm,
um, I think coverage of data, coverage of functionality,
mm.
then we can almost, you can build those kind of ecosystems and partnerships to give them that full picture or package, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think we need to make it clearer to clients. If you think about a sort of, we have many fintech organizations in the UK, and actually that, the movement, I think, is to really, well, it is to really foster this industry. We've had the Khalifa report come out. I think the UK is going to be an increasingly positive space for a fintech to operate in. But if you look at these fintech organizations, certainly in the mid-market area, the compliance functions and teams are not, they don't have tens of years of experience in this space, but they still have to comply with the same legislation. So what it is very important for organizations like us to do is to make it very easy for them to feel comfort that they have complied.
Mm,
We can't go in there assuming that we're dealing with 20 years experience compliance officers that that will tell us what they need. We need to tell them what they need, almost provide a sort of a jigsaw puzzle to say, look, what you really need is this, 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 and this. We can provide this. We know people that can do that. We all fit together
Yeah.
very well. And actually, if you take the package as a whole, or if you work with us, we can actually we can give you extremely comfortable sleeping nights, as opposed to sleepless nights that I'm sure many people have in worrying whether or not they're actually doing the right thing.
I think that's the approach we take when we speak to fintechs as well. They want to be technology led, but want to be sure that they're covering all their bases. And one of the things that we help do as well is you're doing the same thing when you go in and say, well, look, this is our piece of the puzzle, but you need this, this, and this, and here's who you could work with as options. And we're doing the same. We do the same thing from our side. So I think that's definitely rings true from our side as well.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm sure that there are many fintechs that I'm sure will have as one of their sort of OKRs in their business, building a scalable business, and
mm,
and actually, that's what will be driving them from a sort of a tech savvy perspective, and technology can play an absolutely huge role in compliance, and also help them achieve that objective.
100%. Um, Maybe just to finish us sort of this off, then been a really interesting chat actually, Adam. So, but next few years for NorthRow, I'm sure you guys, you're adding functionality and solution, capability to the functionality all the time. What's the next few years look like for you guys?
Yeah, so we're really sort of deepening and our feature set with respect, along the lines of our making compliance work piece. So certainly over the next 12 to 18 months, we're absolutely building capability that deepens the reporting and analytics and insight that we provide out of the platform, not only the sort of the transactions that our clients do themselves, but actually potentially some of the insight on all of the transactions that we've ever done. So there's that sort of that really using the sort of the power of that to be predictive towards our
Mm,
clients and helping them do their jobs better. But we're really sort of basing our sort of near-term sort of solutions around actually providing a sort of a workstation from which compliance teams can do everything they need to do. And that's not just the compliance operative, that's sort of up to the management team, the sort of money laundering reporting officers, etc. So really focusing on that from a feature set perspective, with the sort of the commonality between the regulatory supervisors worldwide, and actually I think there's a sort of a move to make that even more so in the future. We're looking to sort of proliferate our solutions further outside of the UK. So we already serve a number of customers outside of the UK and Europe and beyond. We believe, and we've tested that sort of that approach absolutely works in different geographies. So for us, over the next 2 to 3 years, where we'll be seeing sort of more domestic markets open up for us. And yeah, absolutely want to make sure that we believe that they're solving the problem from the perspective of the team is going to work really, really well. So yes, sort of growth, sort of feature depth and geographic growth is on the cards for us.
Okay, brilliant. Well, I'm sure you will. That will keep you very busy. Thank you for joining us today, Adam. Pleasure to speak to you and hear kind of about what you guys are up to, and look forward to possibly catching up again in the near future.
Yeah,
Um,
great.
thank you again, and yeah, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure. Thanks a lot.